I hadn't heard anything from As It Is since 2015, as they had their lead single, or at least in my eyes, Dial Tones, which followed with Never Happy Ever After, and without hearing anything from them since, even though they do have an extensive discography over my 7-year gap of non-listening, which is nothing against them, just didn't really catch up with them that much. But this album is, I believe, a little lackluster in concept, and lyrically it's covered with topics such as mental illness, as frontman and former YouTuber Patty Walters mentions, but there is also a wave of nostalgia that they like to poke at, but I think it's very divided in that topic, as they have touched on this aspect a lot better in their previous records, as either the songs end up becoming forgetful or they just turn out to be bangers such as I Can't Feel a Thing or I Don't Give a Fuck. But probably the best song is I Miss 2003, which I used to not like when bands would reuse lyrics for their newer material, a problem I had heavily with In This Moment's 2020 record, but this is just such an old school Day to Remember track, and I'm willing to overlook that because I Miss 2003 is a track that just brings me so much positivity. I thought this album could have been a little bit better and worked on a little bit further, but instead we got a few bangers and a mostly forgetful project. So this guy opened up for Falling in Reverse on the Live from the Unknown tour, and I saw Jeris Johnson open up for an old emo outfit of Hawthorne Heights, who definitely deserve better, go stream their new album. Wage War, who is a big influence for me, and after an amazing album like Manic, I was excited. But why was he here? I listened to his song Damn, and when I tell you I tried not to laugh listening to this weird ass banjo trap beat, and at this concert I have never laughed as hard as I did when I heard that banjo loop. And then this fucking Chevy Truck Month mixed with Kid Rock type song called Burning Rubber. And honestly, like, I personally do not enjoy this persona that he's trying to portray, wanting to be the future of rock, when literally nothing on this album is anything revolutionary. It's just more like a collage of sound that don't mix well at all. And not to mention how corny and cringy some of the lyrics are, such as on the aforementioned Burning Rubber, where he literally says, I can't help it, I like him unstable. Or a song that I was kind of half enjoying, Friday, featuring Trippie Redd. Also, something ironic is, he wants to be the future of rock, but his only feature is from an emo trap rapper. I will admit that I do enjoy the track Afterlife, as it's not as obnoxious and is slower in pace, but it's also not as gimmicky as the rest of the album. And the track that I think is the most listenable, probably Going Ghost. I kinda enjoy the more rap rock based instrumental on that song more than the most of the weirder instrumentals that can either sound like an Adam Calhoun track or a rock and roll Jesus style of Kid Rock. I just do not enjoy this album as it is all over the place conceptually, and I think that the persona on display also drags the music down by a lot because of its obnoxious nature. For a person who enjoys Mitski's 2018 project Be the Cowboy as much as I do, as this album was very genre bending, mixing elements of art pop, indie rock, and pop punk with some top tier storytelling and songs that can either cause you to go into a deep depression because of the pure sadness behind it, but then there are other tracks that are just so danceable and it's layered upon itself lyrically. But unfortunately, I think that Laurel Hell is a step down for Mitski. You would think after almost 4 years since her last project that the unique instrumentals on Be the Cowboy could be taken as a template for what to do next. But a bright side on this album is that the songwriting is still Mitski at her best. I think what brings that down the album as much as it does is the sort of pick and choose songs that, while yes they are very different and unique from one another, I don't see a balance between the two mediums I mentioned earlier. The Knife is a very synth-heavy and almost eerie sound to it about mental illness. Stay Soft is a very danceable track about unhealthy sexual relationships and vulnerability. Heat Lightning is about her struggles with insomnia, which is an instrumental that literally sounds like the soundtrack when you're staring at the ceiling wide awake at night, as she uses these dreamlike instrumentals that just adds to the song as well. There's Nothing Left for You is a very synth-heavy track that provides more of Mitski's vocals being shown off in a more minimal way with these exquisite harmonies that echo throughout. Should Have Been Me is my favorite written song in the album because there's a layer of sympathy and a layer for distaste for both Mitski and the person she's talking about, as Mitski is emotionally unattached from her partner. She still seems to show jealousy and a little bit of envy, but as you re-listen, you realize that the flow of the album is very off track. Personally, I think that Mitski fans will enjoy it, but personally, I expected a little bit more due to what I've previously heard.
That match it. That's right, I'm rich and ratchet. She got a fat transfer, no plastic. Whatever necessary. Got more heart than February.
I really don't have much to mention about this album at all, as I felt like it didn't do anything exciting or take any risks in production, and which we know 2 Chainz always has some pretty interesting beats. I'm just wondering why it wasn't capitalized on more. This Project More is a fun album, but while he is saying some questionable lines such as, "I might fly over your crib and take a shit," if anything, I was interested in this project for everything except 2 Chainz himself. Because his personality barely shines through this album, it just seems kind of barren without the features, which most of the time just end up outshining 2 Chainz in my opinion. Youngboy, Stove God Cooks, Lil Baby, Lil Durk, and even surprisingly I enjoyed Sway Lee's feature on Caymans more than I thought originally. And while we're on features, let's mention the worst feature I've heard all year. Roddy Ricch on Outstanding. Roddy Ricch does not need autotune, especially if it's going to be as badly produced as it is. I had no idea who this band was when I started listening to this album, and I wish I didn't continue. This is one of the most unoriginal pop albums I've ever heard. I genuinely get angry listening to it multiple times. This album is drenched in AJR conformity and Imagine Dragons unoriginality. The first half of the album is completely forgettable, and it just gets more unbearable the more you continue to put yourself through this. There are so many things about this project that make me upset or push me the wrong way, such as the off-tune guitar in We Are All We Need, some of the laziest hooks I've ever heard even by pop standards. Listening to a new artist is something that you can be very cautious over, but if I can't tell how these artists are through their music or any kind of personification that can tell me that this is a genuine project made by people who want to make music, nothing really personality-wise that strikes me as wanting to listen again. The production is just basic pop structures for every song, and just like a combo deal, you get overly repetitive lyrics that don't add to the songs at all either. And probably the most enraging song on the album, Goodbye Tommy, is terribly structured in story, which doesn't tell any kind of cohesive narrative. It's the most basic goodbye song I've ever heard. Really cringy sung lines similar to Casey Musgrave's Breadwinner. I don't reward albums that don't try, and this is the most manufactured pop album I've ever had the displeasure of listening to.
Bobby Hill, Jack and Jill, Rocky kills, Perky make you fucking chubby, spazzed out, passed out, talking shit, change routes, meet your fate.
I like Snot. I've kept up with his music for years now, and his third album weirdly enough feels like a sophomore slump. I believe that his first 2 projects were very unique, as he has this very monotone delivery over some, no pun intended, ethereal production and beats. A good song I mention a lot is Moon and Stars from Tragedy, which is definitely my personal favorite. Ethereal is something that I had a lot of problems with on Lil Sky's 2021 project and Certified Lover Boy. We know that these artists are capable of better, but they are not taking any risks at all, and doing the bare minimum, playing it safe. Snot tries doing a lot of different type styles, but what the problem is that Snot has a signature sound, but there are many songs on this project that are either B tier at best or just forgettable emo rap. I found myself enjoying the songs where he just piggybacks on the other features' style, such as A$AP Rocky on Doja, Howie Berry with Juicy J with one of Juicy's best verses in years, but especially on How You Feel with Joey Badass. Pound for Pound is a Joey Badass track. I guess I was expecting more from Ethereal, but I guess we will have to wait and see if he can bounce back from it. I admire Oliver Tree for the experimentation on his projects that he likes to put out. His 2021 project Ugly is Beautiful is one of his most ambitious and enjoyable projects in my eyes. On Cowboy Tears, we get a new style of instrumental for Oliver Tree, as he takes a more country and country pop style, but like with a lot of my problems with mainstream country, a lot of the songs in this project are almost near identical in instrumentation. A shame because Oliver is such a flamboyant character, and I believe that his personality was a big part in what makes his music appealing. The lyrics of this song are very hit or miss, as there are songs like Cigarettes that show Oliver's struggle with trying to quit smoking, or Freaks and Geeks that really expresses his individuality, but my problem is that sonically all of the songs could be on mainstream country hits, but that's not really a good thing, because then that just drowns out any character that this album could have. I should also mention that some of the performances also have a lot to be desired, especially on California, which reminds me of this fine.
Fuck no, baby.
Avril Lavigne is back doing pop punk and pop rock after her abysmal 2019 project Head Above Water, and Love Sucks is nothing to drive home. The lyrics on this album are just full of cliche lines that are so overdone to the point where it feels like Avril was so out of touch with good rock song structures that she's still stuck in her Let Go days. And not to mention, it's not a secret that I'm not a fan of Travis Barker's production, even though he is a great drummer. I don't want to explain, but long story short, I personally don't enjoy his overcompressed instrumentals over the great performances being badly mixed. For fuck's sake, I feel like it's just a cult now, because every Travis Barker production needs an MGK feature, a Black Bear feature, and basic songwriting. Love It When You Hate Me has such a generic chorus just chock full of pop rock cliches, rhymes baby with crazy, Love It When You Hate Me, the comparison of yes and no, and all you are missing is someone mentioning hot and cold and you have a 2006 pop track. The pop rock cheesiness is on full overload, and not to mention she still hasn't changed her weird delivery, especially on Avalanche where I wrote in my notes Avalanche. But the album does pick up during the second half. A big spotlight on the album is All I Wanted featuring Mark Hoppus of Blink-182. It's a great change of pace, their harmonies are super well choreographed, and it's my personal favorite on the album. This album could have been worse, but at least it did end on a good note. Bad Omens is a band that I had the pleasure of seeing back in November on the Hip to Be Scared tour, and I took a deep dive shortly after the announcement of their concert. Their 2016 self-titled and 2019's Finding God Before God Finds Me are very well put together, mixing the dynamics of Noah Sebastian and Joaquin Carlson's vocals and adding some top-tier metalcore production. This album might take a lot of elements of The Word Alive's Monomania, where it's more of a lo-fi post-hardcore as opposed to the typical style, but I do have some issues with this project in the experimental side. The album is way too inconsistent. There are great performances, but the instrumentals are simply derivative that sound similar in structure and melody, and the long runtime of the album just allows a lot for the copy-paste songs to be on here. I don't enjoy the softer singing just because it does kind of get old after a while and just kind of gets boring, which is a big part in why I love Bad Omens music, as the mixing back and forth is what makes them such a great band. And it takes up a majority of the album too. Bad Omens is more diverse in their vocal styles than most, and I wanted to see that duality more present. Songs like Artificial Suicide and The Grey are great tracks, and I will give credit for wanting to experiment with different techniques and styles, but the execution is poorly made in my eyes. The length of the album doesn't help either, as sometimes you just pass through a lot of the same tracks and you just want it to end. This album probably could have been shortened to about half the runtime and half the songs, and I believe it could have been an exceptional project. I found this album from actor Taylor Mccluskey, as I found out that he actually has several albums to his name, and this is a bad album. I'm sorry, but it's a bad album. All of the songs sound like Foo Fighters tracks. The song Justifies drop feels like it's missing something. Mccluskey isn't pushing any kind of bar, he's playing it very safe. His song performance is very minimal and has a lot to be desired. Production is nothing really to drag home about, it's just, honestly, it could be self-produced. All the songs have the same structure and singing style throughout. It almost feels like he's covering Foo Fighters without covering Foo Fighters. Run Run has some of the worst delivered vocals I've heard all year. Energy is very boring as well, doesn't match the instrumental that is laid on top of it. Some of the guitar riffs, especially on Run Run, Shame, and Get Some More, has guitar riffs that are almost carbon copies of one another. She Seeks Me vocals has terribly produced harmonies, and he nearly clips the mic because he has no control over his voice. No sense of rhythm in the second half of the album. He's barely matching or doing anything with these bland dad rock instrumentals. And overall, this is just such a copy-paste album that it's almost plagiarism. I recently did a deep dive into Mom Jeans for their upcoming tour with the story so far, and Mom Jeans has quickly become a favorite band of mine. After finding out that this album was dropping, I was more than excited to listen, and my god, this is personally a top 5 album for me this year. I enjoy the very playful yet relatable songwriting quirks mixed with the cynical and self-deprecating lyrics throughout this project, and it really does make for a quite relatable emo album. Most of the songs are short, sweet, and straightforward, and they're also very straightforward with what the song is about being said, but the personality of Mom Jeans utilizing this aspect and sort of analyze both sides of sadness instead of just blaming it on the other person, you get to hear a human feel in a human way, and it's not using any kind of artistic poetry. Sometimes simplicity is a great thing. Sugar Rush, Circus Clown, What's Up, Graduating Life, Tie-Dye, Acid Trip, Love Later, all of these songs are my favorites on the project, but every single song in this album does not miss. The guitar work on the album are also wonderfully mastered as well. Storytelling is always a great aspect to Mom Jean's music, but my favorite part instrumentally is on Graduating Life, where they intertwine claps and guitar strings that somehow work even though in the beginning it's super off sync. This album just makes me so happy. Mom Jean's dorky sad boy persona is just so entertaining, and I think that this is just a cake topper that what could be an album of the year contender.